Hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Fay Kazzi, and today I'm going to be presenting on how to optimize your microbiome and optimize your life. So a quick disclaimer before we get started. The information being presented here is not intended to take the place of medical advice. Its purpose is to help you make more informed decisions on your lifestyle practices while bringing your attention to data that may not be as actively circulated or reported in mainstream media. This is designed to inspire and encourage you to build your own system of practices that are effective, sustainable, and enjoyable while being supported by evidence-based research. So, what is the microbiome? Before we go too far, I just want you to know the microbiome exists around your entire body. It's not really concentrated in one place per se. You have bacteria, fungi, archaea, and these types of things on your skin, different parts of your nose, in your ears. You have a microbiome balance everywhere, but we're going to be specifically honing down on the most important part of the microbiome, which is in the gut. So the gut microbiome is composed basically of these microorganisms, bacteria, archaea, and fungi. And the most or the largest bulk of them lives in the digestive tract around the end of the digestive tract. So now that you have a better idea of where this all is, we can dive in a little bit more. So this is a little drawing that I put together just to kind of help you understand a little bit of how this looks like in terms of the physiology. So you've probably heard of the intestinal wall or the villi or these finger-like appendages. They're microscopic, of course. So these finger-like appendages that you see is the intestinal wall or the villi. Right underneath that is the bloodstream. So you can think about your food being absorbed into this intestinal wall, and the nutrients that get absorbed go straight into your bloodstream. And in some cases, if bad bacteria passes into the bloodstream, you can get a pretty bad infection. So that can kind of help you understand how that looks like. Between the intestinal wall and the microbiome is a thin layer of mucus, and this helps to protect your intestinal wall from being directly exposed to bad bacteria, because there are good bacteria and bad bacteria in your gut microbiome. So now that you have a better idea, let's move along. All right, so these are some of the main roles of the microbiome. The main roles are digestion, metabolism, immune function, and brain health. Now, if you zoom out a little bit, this is literally the roles of how to live or how life can even happen. We need to digest our food in order to be able to live, and then we need to be able to metabolize that food and break it down and absorb it in a way that is going to be beneficial to the different functions of our body. And then immunity. Immunity is a huge deal, and you've probably already heard about this, that 70 to 80% of your entire immune defense of your entire body resides in your gut. And then brain health. What your body absorbs at the surface of your gut will influence how you think and how you feel. And just like a little plug, in case you didn't know, 90% of your serotonin or your happy hormone is produced in your gut, not in your brain, in case you didn't know that. So these are really important functions that the microbiome has, and we should never underestimate how valuable the health of the, how valuable the health of the gut really is. Okay, we're not going to go into too much detail, but I just wanted you to see a little bit more of the important functions of the gut. So number one up here, it protects us against pathogens. So remember that mucus layer and there's a balance of good and bad bacteria. All that is very important in protecting you from the balance of bad bacteria or pathogens. And then the synthesis of vitamins. You actually can produce your own B12 and vitamin K. And then you have immune system development. So like I said, 70-80% of your immunity is in your gut. And a lot of that is developed there and grows there. And then the promotion of intestinal angiogenesis happens in the gut. So that literally means the production or the creation of new blood vessels. And then the promotion of fat storage. You might notice that some people notice that they're eating okay, but why do they continue to gain weight? And you might be experiencing this yourself. And that might be related to issues with an imbalance in the good and bad bacteria in the gut. And then you have short chain fatty acids, which is abbreviated SCFA. So these short chain fatty acids are produced by the fermentation of dietary fiber, and this only happens in the gut. These are super important. They're literally a powerhouse of nutrients miracle that your body can absorb, and they only get produced when they are fermenting dietary fiber. And then finally, the modulation of the central nervous system. Again, as you know, the most happy hormone is produced in the gut. And then you have mood swings and depression and all of these, what can be termed as psychiatric or psychological disorders, can actually be traced down to the gut and the health of the gut. So let's never underestimate the amount of functionality and dependency that the entire system has on the health of the gut. Okay, so what happens when harmful toxins enter the brain? This is really important. Remember how we talked a little bit about, and I showed you the diagram that I drew of the intestinal wall, and then you had the blood vessel right underneath it, and then you had the mucus, and then the bacteria and fungi right above that. So what happens when harmful toxins from this microbiome, because remember, your microbiome contains good and bad bacteria. So let's say something bad wasn't supposed to pass through, but it ended up passing through for some reason. This could have been because of something called leaky gut, which you might have heard of, which is basically the tight junctions that connect the cell walls in your gut wall basically loosen or break apart, and this allows good and bad things to pass through, unfortunately. So if there's too much inflammation, because this can happen if the gut is bombarded with a lot of toxins or free radicals or really bad food or even poison, what happens is that you can experience inflammation in the gut. And this leads to an inflammatory immune signal, which can cause literally depression, disease, and it can alter brain function. Alterations in the microbiota, which is another term for microbiome, is directly impacted by what we eat, drink, and what drugs we use. And this, of course, can all influence our mental state. So you're not just dealing with your physical body here, you're also dealing with your mental and even spiritual aspect of your being when it comes to your microbiome. So when someone might tell you, well, it doesn't really matter what I eat or drink, it's not going to affect my spiritual life. But actually, it most definitely will, because as you know, you've probably heard about the frontal lobe and how this is where all the processing and our spirituality takes place, and our filter is in the frontal lobe. But what science is now showing us is that a bad diet, drug abuse, addictions, all of these things can bombard and weaken the frontal lobe. And in other words, this can weaken your ability to distinguish between right and wrong, which, as we all know, can directly impact our spirituality. Okay, now let's get into a little bit more details about what isn't working for our microbiome right now, and that is the Western diet. And so the standard American diet, which is ironically abbreviated as SAD, S-A-D, is probably one of the worst diets on the face of the earth right now. And here's the reason why. 63% of America's calories, 63%, comes from refined and processed foods. And basically what that means, when you say the word refined, it means that you've taken away all the fiber, the nutrition, all of those good elements, and you've basically held on to just the energy component or the starchy part of the food. And then you might have added chemicals, more sugar, preservatives, processed oils, and then you might have produced your food. And then you have 25% of America's calories coming from animal-based foods. These include meats, a lot of saturated fat containing foods, dairy products as well. And then only a measly 12% of America's calories come from plant-based foods. And unfortunately, that might not necessarily mean high fiber containing foods. It just means it came from plants. And refined white bread would technically be considered something that came from from plants. So this is basically screaming loud and clear, the Western diet is not working, mostly because it has removed all of the essential healthy components that your gut needs to survive on. And it's been concentrated in mostly calories and sugar and what we call empty calories, which are calories that don't have any nutrition attached to them or vitamins and minerals or not enough. And even if they fortify or re-put in that vitamins or minerals that were extracted during processing, it's still not the same as when it's packaged in its fresh food form. Okay, so the dietary guidelines. Okay, so what does real nourishment really look like? And I know some of you might be thinking, what are you just eating celery every day? No, there's a variety of incredible foods you can put together that will taste amazing and be very good for you. And I just wanted to go through that list with you. So here's the variety of beautiful plant-based foods you can focus on that will give you true nourishment in its organic state and form. Fruits, vegetables, legumes, nuts, grains, roots and tubers, mushrooms, herbs and spices, and high quality dairy. I am in huge support of all this. For my previous cookbook, I'm working on my second one right now. I focused a lot on plant-based foods and how you can combine and create these ingredients right here to create incredibly delicious and satisfying meals. And with just these few, let's say, categories, I was able to produce over 100 recipes. So don't underestimate the combination capacity that you can have with these plant-based foods. So I wanted you kind of to see the vibrancy and the beauty of these natural plant-based foods, you know, the antioxidants that give them these incredible colors, and those colors and those pigments have their own functions and their own roles in protecting your body and in giving you sustained energy. We have those blueberries and the spinach and the broccoli and the ginger. Stone fruits and berries are among the most nutrient dense in the fruit community. Not to say that anything's wrong with bananas or apples, but if you want nutrient density and less calories, this is where you're going to find them. And look how beautiful these colors are. The dark green leafy vegetables like this lacinato kale over here and this beautiful microgreen broccoli over here. If you heard nothing and you just heard me say green microgreens, broccoli microgreens, those are so incredibly nutritious for your gut microbiome. They are literally cancer destroying foods. So if you can get your hands on organic microgreens, those are so good for your gut health as well. And don't get me started with legumes. Legumes are incredibly and profoundly good for your health. They have soluble fibers. Your gut microbiome loves soluble fibers very much. And so there's so many wonderful things you can make with chickpeas. And I think these are monk beans, and you have kidney beans, lentils. You can make most incredible soups. You can make hummus. You can make bean soups. So legumes are so incredible. So please include those in your diet. Nuts in all their glorious raw organic form. You can make the most incredible nut milks, the creamiest desserts by soaking nuts and blending them. They are truly the butter and the cream of the plant-based community. And then you have your whole grains, your quinoa and your rice and your oats. And just remember, when you eat your rice, it really needs to be brown rice, mostly because all that good nutrition is in that husk that you remove to get that starchy white rice. So please include that, because fiber is literally the most important thing for your gut. Now we're going to kind of hone this all down and bring it to a place where it's meaningful to us. Is this just about health, or is there something more than just having a healthy gut microbiome? Hebrews 10:16 says, "This is the covenant that I will make with them after those days, says the Lord. I will put my laws into their hearts, and in their minds will I write them." The truth of the matter is, we are having the Spirit of God and His character imprinted in our hearts and in our minds. But if our minds are not working optimally, we will not be able to detect the nature of the Lord, and we will make poor decisions. So to adequately recognize our role as divine beings, as children of the Most High, we need to recognize that we need to take care of the aspects of our body that support and nourish that part of our person or our mind. And so we do that, I believe, by taking care of our gut health, because so much of your health and the way you think and the way you feel stems from the health of your gut microbiome. And God's hope for you is this: beloved, I wish above all things that you may prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers. We know that the Lord wants for us to be in a state of health, and He's given us the tools and the resources. And there's a Bible verse that says, "My people have perished because of lack of knowledge." So that's why it's so important to educate ourselves and to find the truth, so that we are not, there's so many great people that I've come across and met and say, we never knew that these things were affecting our minds and our bodies in such a terrible way. And the problem is they were still suffering the consequences though. So the lack of knowledge, unfortunately, can cause a lot of damage. That's why it's so important. Educate, educate, educate. Do your own research. There's an abundance of information out there literally at the tip of your fingertips, scientific studies and clinical trials. And so we have the truth there. We just have to look for it. And so Ellen White's message is really important. The real purpose of the health message, and this is what she says: let it ever be kept before the mind that the great object of hygienic reform is to secure the highest possible development of mind, soul, and body. So we see this mind-body interaction explanation coming from Ellen White, and the scientific evidence is showing us profoundly that there is this very intimate connection between the mind and the body, and how they're constantly communicating through biological and chemical processes. And a lot of this communication starts, begins, and ends with the gut. All the laws of nature, which are the laws of God, are designed for our good. Obedience to them will promote our happiness in this life and will aid us in a preparation for the life to come. So the mission, here's what she says, here's the mission when it comes to diet and health. From the beginning of the health reform work, we have found it necessary to educate. Our work is to show the people how they can obtain and prepare the most wholesome food, how they can cooperate with God in restoring his moral image in themselves. So this is her message to us, that we need to educate people and educate ourselves on how best to prepare healthy, wholesome food from sustainable, natural resources so that we can conduct the work that he wants us to do. And I think Satan's on this wild ride of trying to distract us from that by producing the most delicious but toxic foods ever to exist in history. And through the junk food and the fast food avenues, unfortunately. So it's very sad, but we can overcome. And there are incredibly delicious, wonderful ways we can create and combine ingredients that are natural and full of fiber and nutrition in a way that is very desirable and satisfying. Okay, and here's just a little bit more that you can do. Identify a skilled nutrition culinary instructor in your area who shares the vision of creating simple, wholesome recipes, and find ways to shop organically on a budget and how to prepare delicious fiber-rich meals. You can find people who know how to do these things and who do them very well. Bring them and highlight them and allow for them to have a platform to share this information in your community. And consider conducting a series at your church quarterly, because consistency builds habit. So this is something that you can start working on in your own health ministry for your church. I know that you guys have wonderful boards who sit together and discuss these important topics of how to improve the overall health of your congregation so that your congregation can do the most important work, which is that spiritual work. And so you can sit together, huddle, and figure out wonderful ways to bring in health professionals and, let's say, culinary artists, and combine and share your ideas with them and see if they can create presentations and classes to help inspire and promote health in your congregation. And then Genesis 1:29 is a great reminder of how God instructed us to eat, or the base or the majority of what we should consume should be. Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the surface of all the earth, and every tree which has fruit yielding seed. It shall be food for you.